The stage lights burned hot against the backdrop of American flags, the kind of setting designed to symbolize unity yet more often exposing division. Hillary Clinton leaned slightly forward, her voice steady, measured, carrying the weight of experience and the sharpness of someone who had weathered storms far fiercer than the bright lights of a debate hall. She had just begun to outline her vision for how America could protect working families when it happened. Marco Rubio, seated rigidly, snapped to life with a sudden interruption. His words sliced through her sentence like a knife. "Secretary Clinton, you've spent decades in Washington, and all you've proven is that you're part of the problem." The room gasped. Not the polite kind of gasp, but the raw, involuntary exhale that comes when decorum is shattered before your eyes. Clinton paused, eyes narrowing just slightly, a flicker of both irritation and calculation flashing across her face. The moderators shifted uncomfortably. The cameras zoomed in, catching every twitch, every glance. Rubio pressed his advantage, leaning forward, voice dripping with condescension. "You talk about solutions, but you've had your chance. And America is tired of excuses." His words landed with the confidence of someone certain he had struck a fatal blow. But the air told a different story. Some in the audience stiffened in defense of Clinton, recognizing not just the insult to her record but the echo of a deeper dismissal, of women who speak, of leaders who don't fit a narrow mold. Others leaned in, sensing that something historic was about to unfold. Clinton inhaled, slow and deliberate. Her silence in that moment was louder than Rubio's words. It was the silence of someone who had been underestimated too many times before, someone who understood the theater of power and the patience required to let arrogance reveal itself. A murmur swept through the hall. Was she rattled? Was she searching for a comeback? Or was she about to strike with the kind of precision that doesn't just end an exchange but redefines it? The cameras panned from her calm gaze to Rubio's smirk. The contrast could not have been sharper, composure versus provocation, resilience against hubris. The crowd held its breath. But no one could have predicted how Clinton would fire back. The interruption was more than a clash of personalities, it was a collision of symbols. In that debate hall, two very different visions of America collided in real time. On one side stood Hillary Clinton, a woman whose very presence on that stage carried the weight of history. On the other sat Marco Rubio, polished, ambitious, eager to claim the mantle of youth and freshness while dragging his opponent into the shadows of the past. Their exchange was not just about policy, it was about identity, power, and who gets to define the American story. Within minutes, headlines began to flash across social media feeds. Rubio confronts Clinton head-on. Clinton faces fire in debate showdown. But beneath the headlines was something deeper, something viewers felt in their bones. This was about whether experience was strength or liability, whether resilience could triumph over cynicism. Every word was a proxy battle for larger cultural wars that had defined the country. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Clinton's career had been built on breaking barriers, enduring attacks that would have ended the careers of lesser figures. Rubio, meanwhile, represented the impatience of a generation eager to move past the Clintons, past the politics of the 90s and early 2000s, and into a new era. Yet in his eagerness, his sharp jab risked something bigger. It exposed a simmering discomfort in American politics with women who dared to claim authority. For the progressive audience watching at home, the insult landed with a sting. They saw not just an attack on Clinton, but an attack on every immigrant mother who had worked twice as hard to be heard, every daughter told to stay quiet in rooms where men spoke louder. The debate had transformed into something much larger than two candidates sparring on stage. It was a mirror held up to the nation, reflecting the questions Americans wrestled with daily. Clinton, for her part, knew the power of patience. She understood that this wasn't about scoring points on a debate stage, it was about reshaping a narrative that too often cast women leaders as weak, fragile, or out of touch. By holding her silence in that instant, she allowed Rubio's arrogance to hang in the air, unfiltered and unpolished, for every viewer to examine. The networks replayed the clip on loop, dissecting her pause, his smirk, the audience's reaction. Was this the moment Rubio had landed his blow? Or was it the moment he revealed too much about himself? Analysts debated furiously, but ordinary Americans saw something simpler. They saw a woman absorbing an insult with dignity, waiting for the exact second to strike back, not out of anger, but out of strength. And that is why this mattered. It wasn't just Clinton's credibility on trial, nor Rubio's temperament. It was America's character itself. Would arrogance prevail over resilience, or would dignity endure under pressure? This confrontation had become more than political theater, it was a moral referendum disguised as debate. The cameras lingered on Clinton, her lips pressing together in quiet thought. Millions of viewers leaned closer to their screens. They weren't watching for policy details anymore, they were watching for the moment a narrative shifted, when years of dismissal and condescension would meet their reckoning. What happens next doesn't just embarrass Rubio, it rewrites the narrative. Marco Rubio had built his reputation on sharp suits, polished rhetoric, and a smile that seemed crafted for television. To many in his party, he embodied the future, young, telegenic, bilingual, the son of Cuban immigrants who had risen to the U.S. Senate with a compelling story of humble beginnings. He told that story often, weaving it into speeches about opportunity, grit, and the American dream. It was a narrative that resonated, but behind the polish lay a vulnerability, an overconfidence that, time and again, betrayed him. Rubio's talent was undeniable. He could deliver talking points with the cadence of a preacher, the conviction of someone who had rehearsed every line until it flowed effortlessly. But therein lay the flaw. For all his eloquence, he was prone to sounding rehearsed, robotic even. Audiences and journalists alike began to notice patterns. Ask him a tough question and, rather than engage directly, he would pivot back to memorized lines, as though clinging to a script rather than daring to improvise. That tendency was more than just a quirk, it was a weakness. It signaled that beneath the veneer of confidence, Rubio was wary of confrontation that strayed beyond the confines of his prepared speeches. Opponents spotted it. Journalists mocked it. Viewers began to doubt the authenticity of a man who seemed to speak with polish but not with spontaneity. Yet none of this dimmed Rubio's belief in his ability to win. He thrived on the adoration of crowds, on the way donors whispered his name as the fresh face who could revive a party struggling with generational divides. Every debate, every interview reinforced that image. The cameras loved him, and he knew it. His confidence only swelled. By the time he faced Hillary Clinton across the debate stage, Rubio carried himself like a man certain of his advantage. Clinton, in his eyes, was the embodiment of everything he had railed against: entrenched establishment power, a figure tied to decades of Washington politics, vulnerable to attack. He believed that by striking early, by dismissing her mid-sentence, he could undercut her authority and elevate himself as the fearless challenger. He mistook aggression for dominance. But the cracks were visible. Those who had followed Rubio's career closely knew the pattern well. When pressured beyond his rehearsed lines, his rhythm faltered. During previous debates, he had repeated the same memorized phrase 4 times in a row, each iteration more awkward than the last, until even his supporters winced. His opponents had seized on it mercilessly, branding him mechanical, unprepared, even hollow. That moment had been a warning shot. Still, Rubio pressed forward, convinced that charm and bravado could mask the substance that sometimes eluded him. In the green rooms and strategy sessions leading up to this showdown, his advisors had drilled him: attack early, project strength, force Clinton onto the defensive. To Rubio, it was a winning playbook. He carried himself with the air of a man who believed the script was already written in his favor. And that was the fatal mistake. Confidence without humility breeds arrogance, and arrogance in politics is a double-edged sword. It inspires boldness, yes, but it also blinds. It blinds one to the subtle cues of the audience, to the undercurrents of emotion, to the patience of an opponent who has endured more firestorms than most could imagine. Rubio didn't see the trap he was walking into. In his mind, Clinton was cornered, diminished by his interruption, weakened by his jab. He believed the smirk he flashed after his outburst signaled victory, that the gasp of the crowd was an endorsement of his audacity rather than a warning of its cost. He failed to recognize that sometimes silence is more powerful than words, and that the pause Clinton held was not hesitation, it was calculation. This was not the first time Rubio's overconfidence had set the stage for collapse. History had shown glimpses of it before, moments when he mistook applause for approval, when he equated rehearsed soundbites with substance, when he confused bravado with strategy. Each time, he survived, brushing off the critiques, buoyed by his natural charisma. But survival is not the same as victory, and survival becomes harder when arrogance hardens into habit. And so, in that hall, under the harsh glare of cameras, Rubio leaned into his flaw with reckless confidence. He didn't just attack Clinton, he dismissed her, underestimating both her resilience and the audience's instinct for fairness. He believed he had cornered her, but in truth, he had cornered himself. But arrogance, history has shown, is a dangerous ally in politics. Hillary Clinton's story was never one of ease. From the earliest days of her public life, she found herself walking a tightrope stretched higher and thinner than most men around her ever had to navigate. Every move was scrutinized, every word dissected, every decision weighed against impossible standards. Yet, time after time, she stepped into the storm, enduring pressures that would have broken almost anyone else. She had been in the national eye for decades, not just as a first lady, but as a policymaker, a senator, a secretary of state. Each role brought triumphs, but also relentless attacks. Scandals, some real, many manufactured, swirled around her like hurricanes. Her opponents painted her as cold, calculating, untrustworthy. The media magnified her every stumble, dissecting her tone, her laugh, even her wardrobe. For men, these were trivialities. For her, they became weapons wielded against her ambitions. And yet, Hillary Clinton never disappeared. She never bowed out, never let the torrent wash her away. Instead, she stood taller, as if the very weight of criticism forged her spine into steel. Her resilience became her defining trait. Critics called her stubborn, her supporters called her unbreakable. But all agreed on one thing: she endured. That endurance was not just political, it was personal. Behind the public figure was a woman who had weathered betrayals, who had stood in the harsh glare of scandal and humiliation, and who had somehow managed to transform private pain into public resolve. When others might have retreated into quiet obscurity, Hillary chose to fight on, channeling her struggles into a larger mission, to prove that dignity, persistence, and preparation could withstand any assault. She carried with her the memory of every young girl who had been told to stay quiet, every immigrant who had been told they didn't belong, every working mother balancing survival with dreams. Her life had become a symbol of what it meant to be underestimated, dismissed, and yet refused to yield. That symbolism was not lost on her as she took her place on the debate stage. She knew she was not just speaking for herself, she was speaking for millions. For Hillary, preparation was everything. She studied relentlessly, armed herself with facts, anticipated every angle of attack. Critics mocked her for being overprepared, for drowning in details, but in reality, it was her armor. In a world where mistakes were magnified, where a slip of the tongue could be replayed endlessly on cable news, she could not afford to be anything less than precise. Every briefing, every debate prep session, every policy memo was a shield against the inevitable storm. But what set her apart was not just preparation, it was poise. Under pressure, she exuded a calm that was almost unnerving to her opponents. Where others lost their cool, she seemed to grow steadier, her voice firm, her gaze unwavering. She had been shouted over, insulted, and demeaned in countless hearings and debates, yet she never allowed her composure to crack. That discipline, honed over years of being tested, made her uniquely suited for moments exactly like this one. On that debate stage, facing Marco Rubio's interruption, all those years seemed to converge. She had heard it all before, the dismissals, the accusations, the attempts to silence her. Rubio's jab was not new, it was simply another verse in a long, tired chorus she had been forced to endure her entire career. And yet, in its familiarity, it carried a different weight. For her, this was not just another attack, it was an opportunity. The crowd's gasp, the smirk on Rubio's face, the tension hanging in the room, it was all too familiar, yet this time, she knew exactly how to wield it. The silence she held after his interruption was not hesitation. It was power. It was the stillness before a storm, the pause that allowed the audience to see Rubio's arrogance laid bare. She knew that her response would not just answer his jab, it would crystallize her decades of struggle into a single, unforgettable moment. Her life had been a series of trials preparing her for this stage. Every headline that mocked her laugh, every scandal that dragged her name through the mud, every opponent who thought they had finally destroyed her, each had taught her something. Each had sharpened her instincts, tempered her resolve, and prepared her for the exact moment when her words could shatter arrogance and transform vulnerability into strength. As the cameras zoomed in, as millions watched with bated breath, Hillary Clinton drew upon the sum of her battles, the weight of her history, and the silent support of those who saw themselves reflected in her resilience. This was more than a debate, it was destiny. And in that moment, her entire life's experience crystallized into one response. The moment Rubio sensed an opening, he lunged. His voice sharpened like a blade, cutting through Clinton's measured cadence. "You talk about leadership, Secretary Clinton," he said, leaning forward with the confidence of a man rehearsed for battle, "but America remembers your failures. From foreign policy blunders to trust issues, you've built a career out of dodging accountability." The crowd stirred. The energy shifted. His supporters erupted with applause, eager for the knockout blow. Cameras zoomed in, eager to capture the image of a towering challenger bearing down on a veteran. To Rubio, this was the kill shot. Clinton didn't flinch. Her lips curved into the faintest trace of a smile, the kind reserved for a fighter who's seen the punch before it lands. She adjusted the microphone, allowing silence to stretch, long enough for tension to fill every corner of the auditorium. "Senator Rubio," she began evenly, "it's remarkable how much certainty you project with so little substance to stand on." Her tone wasn't defensive, it was surgical. The audience, sensing the scalpel, leaned in closer. Rubio pressed again, unwilling to lose ground. "It's not projection, Secretary, it's reality. You've left America weaker abroad, more divided at home. People deserve honesty, not polished speeches." He punctuated every word with a jab of his finger, his volume rising as if louder meant truer. This time, the applause faltered. Something in his urgency felt less like dominance and more like desperation. Clinton, by contrast, radiated calm, a stillness that magnified the storm swirling around her. "You speak of division, Senator," she replied, her voice firm yet steady, "but let's be clear, division thrives when leaders substitute slogans for solutions. I've spent my life facing scrutiny, challenges, and yes, mistakes, but I've never run from the responsibility that comes with leadership. Can you say the same?" The audience murmured, a low wave building momentum. Clinton's words carried not just rebuttal, but a quiet authority. Each phrase landed with weight, drawing nods even from those who had entered skeptical. Rubio, sensing the ground shifting, doubled down. He launched into a rapid-fire attack, stringing talking points like ammunition unloaded in panic. "You can't hide behind prepared lines, Secretary. This isn't about slogans, it's about your record. And your record is failure." But repetition, once a weapon, now betrayed him. The cadence grew mechanical, his fervor too polished, too familiar. The whispers began, the audience recognizing the cracks. Clinton let him run. She knew the rhythm, the habit, the overplayed script. And when the echoes of his words faded into awkward silence, she stepped forward. The room hushed. All eyes fixed on her. Her voice dropped lower, more intimate, commanding attention without raising volume. "Senator, the American people don't need another politician shouting them into submission. They need someone who listens, who understands, who's lived through the fire and come out stronger. Leadership isn't measured by volume, it's measured by resilience." The hall erupted, not in divided cheers, but in a collective roar. Even those uncertain moments before now felt the momentum tilting. Rubio straightened, visibly rattled. He tried to recover, tried to throw another line, but the force behind his words was gone. His opponent was no longer just answering him, she was redefining the battle. And then, with the air charged and the crowd on edge, came the moment no one could have scripted. Clinton's eyes locked with his, her voice cutting clean through the chaos. But then came the line that broke the dam. The tension in the debate hall was electric, palpable enough that even the cameras seemed to tremble on their mounts. Marco Rubio had just unleashed a flurry of attacks, each designed to corner Hillary Clinton, each delivered with the fervor of a man desperate to seize the spotlight. But now, silence reigned. The air hung heavy, expectant. The audience waited. Clinton's pause was deliberate, weaponized. She understood the value of stillness, the art of letting her opponent overextend, and in that silence, Rubio's confidence began to fray. She leaned slightly toward her microphone, her expression calm, almost serene, as though she were about to lecture a law student rather than confront a rival on national television. And then, with perfect timing, she began. "Senator Rubio," she said, her tone measured, "I admire your enthusiasm. I really do. But there's a difference between rehearsed passion and real leadership. America knows the difference." A ripple of laughter coursed through the crowd, subtle at first, then swelling. Rubio shifted in his stance, lips tightening, eyes darting nervously toward the audience. Clinton continued, her rhythm precise, pause, then strike. "You've spent your career giving speeches about the future, but when it comes time to act, time to make hard decisions, the record is thin. The American people deserve more than sound bites and slogans. They deserve results." The audience erupted in applause, some rising to their feet. Hashtags began forming in real time, #SoundbiteSenator, #ResultsMatter. Rubio's composure cracked just slightly, a bead of sweat glistened under the harsh lights. He tried to interject. "That's not." But Clinton cut him off, not with volume, but with precision. She raised her hand slightly, not to silence him, but to signal control. "You've had your turn, Senator. Let's deal in facts." She ticked them off, one by one. "When Floridians needed bold leadership on immigration reform, you folded. When climate change threatened your own state, you called it a hoax. And when your campaign hit turbulence, you repeated the same 30-second soundbite 4 times in a row. America doesn't forget." The audience gasped, a collective intake of breath. Laughter broke out, louder this time, with an edge of disbelief. The camera panned to a young college student in the crowd, hands over his mouth in shock. Another shot captured an older veteran nodding slowly, as if to say, "She's right." Rubio's face flushed. His jaw tightened. He attempted to mask it with a smirk, but the camera caught the flicker of unease. His hands, once slicing the air with authority, now fidgeted near the podium. Clinton pressed on, her voice carrying the steadiness of decades spent in political combat. "You claim I dodge accountability. But here I am, on this stage, after decades of public service, scrutinized, criticized, investigated, attacked, and I'm still standing. Because leadership isn't about never facing adversity. It's about how you respond when you do." The audience roared. Some clapped, others stood, and the energy reverberated like a wave crashing against the walls of the auditorium. Twitter lit up, still standing, trending in seconds. Rubio swallowed hard. His rebuttal, once sharp, now dulled under the weight of her words. He stammered, searching for a line, but every attempt felt recycled, predictable. Clinton didn't relent. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing just enough to lock on her opponent. "Senator, you say America deserves honesty. Let's be honest, then, your greatest political strength, your polished delivery, is also your greatest weakness. Because when the speeches run out, there's nothing behind them." The crowd gasped again, a sound not of laughter this time, but of recognition. It was the moment the debate shifted irreversibly. The viral clip had been born. Cameras cut to Rubio. He looked smaller now, his posture shrinking, his rehearsed charm evaporating under the blaze of her precision. His eyes darted toward the moderator, as if hoping for rescue. None came. Clinton let the silence stretch again, an intentional choice, allowing the weight of her words to settle into every mind in the room. Then, softly, but firmly, she delivered the finishing blow. And that's the difference between us, Senator. You repeat lines. I've lived them. I don't need to rehearse resilience, it's been my life's work. The crowd erupted as though a dam had burst. Applause thundered. Shouts echoed. Some stood waving signs, others cheered with fists raised. Phones across the arena recorded feverishly. Within minutes, the clip would dominate feeds, #MightDropHillary trending worldwide. Rubio's unraveling was complete. His attempts to regain footing came across as petulant, almost desperate. That's not fair, Secretary, he began, but the words drowned under the roar of the audience. His voice cracked slightly, betraying the pressure. The camera captured every detail, the clenching of his jaw, the twitch of his eye, the way his hand gripped the podium as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. He was unraveling in real time, a politician undone not by scandal, not by misstep, but by sheer rhetorical mastery. Meanwhile, Clinton stood tall, calm, even smiling faintly as if to signal, this is what leadership looks like. The debate moderator, caught in the maelstrom, tried to regain control. Ladies and gentlemen, please, let's allow the candidates to continue, but the audience refused to quiet down. The energy had shifted irreversibly. By now, social media had exploded. Clips of Rubio fumbling, spliced against Clinton's razor-sharp counter, spread like wildfire. Memes emerged instantly, Rubio's repeated soundbites set to robotic auto-tune, side by side with Clinton's composed smile. Commentators tweeted in real time, "This is the knockout blow. Rubio just got dismantled on national TV." Rubio tried one last jab. "You think you can lecture me on leadership, Secretary? You." Clinton's expression didn't change. She leaned slightly closer to her mic and, with devastating calm, delivered the final twist of the knife. "Senator, this isn't a lecture. This is a reminder that leadership is earned, not recited." The words detonated. The audience exploded into cheers so loud the moderator's gavel could barely be heard. Rubio froze, momentarily stunned, his rehearsed smile cracking. The camera lingered on his face, a portrait of a man who believed he had his opponent cornered, only to find himself dismantled in full public view. For Clinton, it was more than just a victory in the debate. It was vindication. Every struggle, every scandal, every headline that had tested her resolve culminated in this single, devastating moment. Her composure under fire, her ability to turn attack into opportunity, had crystallized into a performance that would echo long after the stage lights dimmed. And yet, as the cheers rolled on, as Rubio's unraveling played out across millions of screens, there lingered a truth few yet realized. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of the storm. The debate had ended, but in truth, the real battle was only just beginning. As the moderators signed off and the stage lights dimmed, America's attention shifted not to policy or platforms, but to the single moment replaying endlessly across screens big and small. Clinton's calm, cutting rebuttal had detonated like political dynamite, and within minutes, the shockwaves surged far beyond the debate hall. On Twitter, the battlefield opened instantly. The hashtags came alive, like banners carried by soldiers charging into war, #ClintonMightDrop, #RubioShaken, #SheOwnedIt. Each word was sharper than any policy paper, each meme more powerful than a campaign ad. Clips of Rubio's faltering expression, his forced smile, his eyes darting for an escape route, looped endlessly with captions like, "When you realize you picked the wrong fight." For Clinton's supporters, it was vindication. Years of watching her weather attacks, endure slanders, and stay standing had finally boiled into a moment of triumph that could not be dismissed or spun away. Immigrant families, women leaders, young activists, all flooded social media with posts calling her response not just a political win, but a cultural milestone. One viral tweet read, "For every time a woman's been interrupted at work, Clinton just spoke for us all." It racked up hundreds of thousands of likes within hours. Meanwhile, Rubio's camp scrambled. His communications team fired off statements, insisting he hadn't been rattled, that Clinton's remarks were rehearsed, contrived. But the spin couldn't compete with the visual truth etched into millions of screens: his silence, his stumble, his visible defeat. Comedians pounced almost gleefully. Late-night hosts aired monologues dubbing him Senator Stammer, sketch shows reenacted the moment with exaggerated stutters, and TikTok creators mashed up his faltering smile with soundtracks of collapsing buildings. The mainstream press tried to cloak the moment in objectivity, but even headlines betrayed the tilt: Clinton lands knockout blow, Rubio reels after debate clash, one line that may define 2024. The coverage framed the night not as a policy discussion but as a story of dominance and downfall. And that story, no matter how the pundits tried to dissect it, was spreading with the wildfire speed of digital virality. Even celebrities couldn't resist the pull. Pop stars tweeted about Clinton's boss energy. Actors posted memes cheering her as if she'd been cast as the heroine in America's latest political drama. Athletes chimed in with one-word posts: respect. Within hours, the moment transcended politics, becoming something larger, a cultural flex, a piece of national theater. And yet, what stunned observers most wasn't just the applause but the sheer range of those who chimed in. Immigrant rights groups declared it proof that dignity could still triumph in politics. Feminist writers penned essays calling it a generational moment of vindication. Even some moderate commentators, who had long viewed Clinton with skepticism, admitted on air that she had delivered one of the most commanding debate moments in modern history. Rubio, for his part, tried to fight back. He appeared on morning shows, smiling through gritted teeth, brushing it off as part of the game. But every interview seemed haunted by the ghost of the night before. Anchors replayed the clip before his answers, forcing him to relive it. The harder he tried to minimize the blow, the bigger it seemed to grow. He was trapped, boxed in by his own overconfidence. Meanwhile, Clinton's team didn't even need to amplify the moment. The public was doing it for them. Clips were shared in WhatsApp groups, played at family dinner tables, texted between friends. It wasn't just a debate response anymore, it had become folklore, an example of composure beating bluster, of resilience crushing arrogance. By sunrise the next day, it was clear this wasn't simply another media cycle. The shockwaves were too strong, the resonance too deep. What Clinton had delivered wasn't just a rebuttal, it was a reframing of power itself. A viral moment had crystallized into a narrative, one that would follow both candidates far beyond the debate stage. And yet, as Clinton scrolled through the avalanche of reactions, even she couldn't have predicted the next twist. Because while victory felt sweet, what unfolded in the days to come would test her legacy in ways she hadn't imagined. And yet, even Clinton herself was stunned at what came next. The dust settled, but the echoes of that night carried far beyond the debate stage. For many, the clash between Hillary Clinton and Marco Rubio was not simply an exchange of policy points or political jabs, it was a parable. It was a reminder that politics, at its rawest, exposes not just platforms but the character of those who seek to lead. Clinton's measured composure in the face of Rubio's aggression crystallized into something larger, a lesson about dignity triumphing over arrogance, resilience standing taller than bluster. Across the country, living rooms, community centers, and classrooms replayed the moment on screens big and small. Parents showed their daughters, saying, "See? That's strength." Immigrant families nodded with quiet recognition, seeing in Clinton's endurance an echo of their own battles, the constant proving, the endless tests, the refusal to crumble when the world demands submission. To them, the exchange wasn't just political theater, it was symbolic of their own journeys, where dignity is often their only weapon against condescension. For others, the moral cut even deeper. Rubio's unraveling wasn't just a stumble, it was arrogance exposed. Time and again, history has shown what happens when pride swells louder than substance. His strategy that night, interrupt, dominate, belittle, was the strategy of someone who believed victory came from volume. But Clinton's quiet precision dismantled that illusion. Her rebuttal was not just an answer, it was a reckoning. And in that reckoning lay a universal truth: in moments of trial, authenticity prevails where performance falters. The moral resonated not because it was about two politicians, but because it mirrored America itself. This nation, stitched together by people who have endured trials, has always faced the question: will arrogance rule us, or will resilience define us? The debate became a mirror, reflecting back an America still grappling with the same question. Clinton's response was a reminder that our collective dignity, the insistence that truth, fairness, and perseverance matter, can silence even the loudest attempts to overshadow it. And yet, the beauty of that moment wasn't only in its sting. It was in what it offered: hope. Hope that discourse can still reward those who steady themselves in storms. Hope that leadership is not measured by the sharpness of a jab, but by the steadiness of character. Hope that even in the noisy circus of modern politics, the quieter virtues, patience, discipline, unshakable resolve, can still rise and command the stage. As the days passed, the hashtags faded, the headlines shifted, and new controversies flooded the news cycle. But the lesson endured. Students quoted it in essays. Activists invoked it in speeches. Comedians continued to riff on it, not just to laugh, but to remind. And in conversations around dinner tables, people used it as shorthand: don't be a Rubio. Hold your dignity like Hillary did. Because in the end, this was never only about Hillary Clinton or Marco Rubio. It was about the story America tells itself about who wins when power collides with principle. It was about proving that arrogance, however loud, however sharp, eventually breaks against the wall of resilience. The clash left us with more than memes or viral clips. It left us with a truth worth carrying forward: that real strength is not in domination, but in the courage to hold one's ground with dignity intact. And in an era hungry for cynicism, that reminder felt revolutionary. The debate was over. The hall had emptied. The noise had quieted. But for millions, the moral reverberated long after: resilience beats bullying, dignity beats arrogance. And for those who believe in a better, fairer America, that truth was not just comforting. It was a call, a reminder that in every fight, whether personal or political, the measure of victory is not how loud you shout, but how firmly you stand. And so, we circle back to where it all began, that unforgettable showdown. A night when words cut sharper than swords, when a single exchange revealed more about character than countless campaign ads ever could. Hillary Clinton's calm, devastating rebuttal wasn't just a debate moment, it was a turning point, a viral spark that ignited conversations across the nation. Marco Rubio came armed with arrogance, but he left exposed. Clinton, steady and composed, delivered a mic-drop lesson that still resonates: dignity outlasts bluster, and resilience always finds its voice. But this story isn't locked in the past. It's a reflection of the America we live in today, an America where the fight between arrogance and dignity continues to play out in our politics, our workplaces, our communities. These moments matter because they remind us of what we value, and what we refuse to compromise. They remind us that the future isn't written by those who shout the loudest, but by those who stand firm with clarity, courage, and conviction. That's why we tell these stories, not just to remember them, but to carry their lessons forward. Because the story of America is not finished. It's being written, every day, by all of us. If moments like this matter to you, if you believe that dignity should always outshine arrogance, then don't let this clip fade into history. Share it. Talk about it. Keep the conversation alive. And if you want more stories that peel back the curtain on politics and reveal the battles that shape our nation, make sure to hit subscribe and join us here. Because together, we're not just watching history. We're writing it.